Well, thanks for coming here today. I'm going to begin this session by just a very brief introduction of our featured guest today. So Dr. Laura King is currently a Curator's Distinguished Professor of Psychological Sciences at the University of Missouri. She's a new editor of Perspectives of Psychological Science. She's previously served as an editor of the third section of Journal of Personality and Social Psychology and the Journal of Research and Personality. Laura's made key research contributions across a wide range of topics across personality and social psychology, including goal strivings, lay conceptualizations of the good life, maturity, coping and growth through trauma, individual differences in cognitive processing styles, well-being judgments, and the experience of meaning in life. Laura's been the recipient of numerous grants and awards. I won't name them all today, but including being named this year's recipient of the Jack Block Award for Distinguished Research in Personality. Speaking from personal experience, Laura is a brilliant scholar, a generous mentor, a wonderful friend, an amazing storyteller, as you will hopefully see today, and a downright interesting person. So it's my pleasure to get to have this conversation with you here today. So please join me in welcoming.
It's your
Sure.
pleasure.
Welcoming Laura King. So the "it's my pleasure" bit might have been a little stretch. I thought we'd begin by letting the audience in on some conversations we had leading up to this session. Can you tell everybody the circumstances surrounding you accepting this invitation?
Yes, I will. I was on vacation, and we had just seen Hamilton in New York, and it was amazing, and I was so filled with happiness, and then wine. And then I got this email from Elliot asking me if I would be interested in doing this, and I was so filled. Yes! Oh my God, that sounds awesome! I thought Samantha would be a great interviewer. Yes! Well, that's a great opportunity for her.
And then you returned from vacation and told me...
I got us into something. I'm really sorry.
So we're basically a little bit uncomfortable, both of us, spending this amount of time just simply talking about Laura as a person. But in thinking about it, I think it's less of a practice of narcissism and more of an invitation to relate to Laura. I know as a student of Laura's, a former graduate student, the ability to relate to her as a person really helped me to feel like I belonged in this field. So I hope that through this, others can start to feel that same sense through hearing about Laura's life outside of the lab.
Outside of the lab. And I should say that I am responsible for the intensely outside of the lab version of this activity, because it seems to me that sometimes social and personality psychologists tend to just default to shop talk. And I really, when we talked about what kinds of questions Samantha was going to ask, I'm like, why are you asking me about? If there is some bit of my research that you're interested in, you know they have this thing called a Google Scholar. It's pretty awesome. Or PsycInfo, and you're welcome to go check it out. But this is about my life.
So your life outside the lab started somewhere.
Indeed.
So you grew up in you grew up in Ohio.
Correct.
And do you want to tell me a little bit about sort of your early family life, what your family was like, what it was like growing up in Ohio?
Yeah, so I grew up in a really small town, Dover, Ohio. It is the home of Ernest Mooney Werther, the world's master carver. I'm sure you've heard of it. It's just off I-77. It is a small town, and it's really in the middle of nowhere. It's not really close to Cleveland, and it's not really close to Columbus. It's just south of the Canton-Akron area. I grew up in a wonderful family, a blue-collar family. We lived in this little house. I have an older brother and a younger sister. My brother is now, he's a hydrogeologist who does environmental geology stuff. And my sister is a high school teacher who specializes in learning disabilities. And my dad worked at the telephone company, and they met there. And it was whatever. I was wrecked. I could never become a great novelist because it was really pretty idyllic. They were really loving, caring people. Sorry.
Do you remember what you wanted to be when you grew up?
Yeah, so when I was little, I think, I wanted to be a veterinarian or a nun. No, I wanted to be, I think a journalist was the first thing I really wanted to be. And then as I got, there was one time I mentioned I wanted to be a psychiatrist. I told my mom when I was 7 I was going to be a psychologist to find out what was wrong with her. Which is funny, because that's not the kind of psychologist I am.
Right, I'm sure your research hasn't quite figured that out yet.
No.
So what were you like as a young teen? And
Really?
Oh, yeah.
I was a weirdo. I was weird, although I was friends with everybody. I was kind of a nerd. I played D&D. Yeah, my son does it now, and I'm so happy to carry on the tradition. I was involved in theater in high school. Most of my friends were cheerleaders, but I was not, because I felt that it was objectifying. Whatever. I was like budding young feminist. When I was in 7th grade, my teacher gave me the award of the Female Chauvinist Sow Award for my feminist views in Catholic school.
Add it to the list. I don't know that one's on your Vita right now. So what did your parents do for work? You mentioned a little bit about that.
Yeah, so my mom, okay, so when my parents met, my mom was a telephone operator. Okay, and I know that nobody in here even knows what that is anymore. They used to have a thing, right? And there's literally a picture of my mom with like the headset and pushing the things, and I don't know, I know this is gonna go public. I guess it's okay since my mother is, she died, but she used to like listen in on people's conversations. So she was a telephone operator and she could do these things, right? So she found out that one of my aunts, my mom had 5 sisters and 3 brothers, this huge Italian Catholic family. And so she had all these sisters, and my Aunt Mary Lee was my mom's youngest sister, and she was dating this guy. And my mom, oh gosh, I hope he's dead. Oh dear, if he listens, here's what happened. I'm so sorry. Here's what happened. My mom was listening in on his phone conversations. He was asking another girl out. And she called home and patched it in and said, "Put Mary Lee on the line." And so my aunt heard her boyfriend flirting with some other girl, and that was the end of their relationship. And that story lived in infamy, and now I've blabbed it. Oh.
And your father?
So my dad, also he worked at the telephone company. He was a central office equipment installer. He was the president of his local labor union. I found out, so he got us all, we were all kind of like these social justice children. We used to go they were on strike one summer when I was a little kid, and we went and sat on the picket line, and it was so crazy. My dad, this was back in like the late 60s, one of the issues was that the telephone company was telling the young men that they couldn't wear beards or long hair. Right, and so one of my dad's issues was you can't control how people wear their hair, or if it has nothing to do with their job. And I remember when I was little, we were sitting out. So my mom's big family, right? Everyone was taking care of us because my dad was on strike, and so the whole family came to our house for a picnic, and they had set up tables on the lawn, and I was pretty young, right? But I'm just like kind of wandering around and looking at all these people. And my dad is walking across the lawn, and he's got long hair and a beard. And my mom goes up and grabs him and grabs his beard and says, "Hey, look, everybody, I'm married to Castro." And I thought, when I grow up, I'm going to marry Castro. I was like, not at all a Freudian moment.
So that seemed you had sort of a blue-collar upbringing.
Yeah.
And now you've entered into this academic life. Were there struggles that you faced sort of working through this academic pipeline as a first-generation student?
I was a first-generation college student. So I think there were things I was missing, right? Just like a level of getting the game and how things are done and what people are talking about and feeling somewhat out of place. But on the other hand, I was also so naive that I didn't even know what I didn't know. And so I was like absolutely the biggest. Like when I went to Kenyon College in Ohio, and all of these people around me were so jaded, right? They all came from boarding schools and had been there, done that. Meanwhile, I was like, wow, did you see, I felt like when I walked into those classes rooms, right, and I would be having these amazing professors, and I would walk out of class and the trees were greener than they were when I went in. And it changed my life, right? It changed my life forever. I was so for me, it was just this amazing time. But I feel like in some weird way, I was like I was the main character of my movie, and all these other people, I don't know what they're talking about, right? And they were living a different life than me. I was so into this setting and the opportunities, and it really was there that I recognized. People always ask, so how did you decide to become a social psychologist? I never made that decision. How did you become a personality psychologist? I kind of made that decision, but what I really decided to be was a professor. I really decided I wanted to spend my life in that setting forever. I wanted to be someplace where my life changed when the seasons change, and where I was always surrounded by people who, like, every dumb old idea I've ever had is brand new to them. And I love I know it's totally idealistic and probably not true, but I like the idea of being someplace where what's important, like the commerce of our life, is the quality of your ideas. Where it doesn't matter what your name is, or who your father was, or where he works, or how much, what you're wearing. What matters is the quality of your ideas. And if you have good ideas, you belong at this table. And that's like I know that that's an idealistic thing, but it's one of the things that propelled me into academia.
And fast forward to now, I think you've put that into practice a lot in thinking about your graduate students. I'm also a first-generation college student. I think several above me and several after me also were. Was that intentional, or?
I don't know. Isn't that crazy? I don't know why that is. I think I didn't even realize that, right, until you said it. And then I was starting to think about, well, why would that be? I think when I'm talking to students, right, one of the biggest, like the way I'm not a decision maker. Tell that to all the authors I rejected over the last few years. But a lot of my relationships with students and the students that I work with, and it's really about the quality of our conversation, right? And it's the quality of my ideas when I'm talking to that person, right? And it's possible without me knowing it, right? It's the things that we have in common, like that sense of we're from the real world. We know how lucky we are that we're like, wow, I'll tell you what, nothing will make you more excited to go to classes and do your reading and do well in school than working in a factory in the summers, which is what I did. I mean, oh my gosh, right? So there's nothing I do that is worse than that at all, not even close. I used to come home, oh my God. So I worked this horrible shift, right? You have to start at 5 a.m. for this factory. And so I'd wake up at 3 or 4 in the morning and start crying because I hated it so much. And my mom would be like, well, you just need to pull yourself together. Get out there and do your doggy duty. And I'm like, I hate it. I really hate it. And she said to me, do you think your dad loves his job? And then I was like, oh my God, it's even worse than I thought. Like, oh no. And he did. I mean, he enjoyed his job. But for him, his job was this way to support his family. And I think that to have a job that I really love, right, that I can hardly stop doing, I just really, really enjoy it, is such a privilege. And I think students coming from that kind of background know that. There's other ways that people live, and it's not always a job that you love. And to have your ideas be so valued, I think, is a really big deal. But I also think, I've thought about this, maybe one reason is because I do keep a relatively small lab. And I think that it's okay if someone comes to me and they're not done yet, they're not a finished product, they still have some ragged edges, or maybe they are not as directed or whatever, I don't mind, because I know we're going to work together. And when you come out on the other end, you're going to be awesome. So, and I think that if somebody, I like people who are just getting started. I mean, I enjoy that.
Sure. So your road to get there, you mentioned Kenyon College a bit. What made you pick that school in particular?
Okay, well, I'll tell you what. this is really funny. So I mentioned I come from a blue-collar background, but I was like, I was whatever, valedictorian in my class, blah, blah, blah. So I went to this college fair. I had won a scholarship from the state of Ohio that was $1,000. Like, that seemed like such a huge amount of money. And so therefore, if I wanted to use that, I had to stay in the state of Ohio. Like, whatever. I must stay inside Ohio because I don't want that $1,000 to go to waste. So I went to this college fair as a senior, and Kenyon College had this booth set up. And I went up and I started looking at the pictures, and it is an incredibly beautiful campus. And I started looking at the, information, and the classes seemed so great, and everything about it seemed wonderful. And I said to the guy who was there, "So do you have any information about financial aid?" And he said, "If you need to ask about financial aid, you probably shouldn't apply." And I said, "I'll be seeing you on campus." I was like, oh yeah, you really? Mm-hmm. I took all the information I had. I told this guidance counselor guy I really liked, Kenyon. He was like, whatever. I told my English teacher I really loved Kenyon. He's like, oh, I could totally see you there. So I went home, I showed my parents the stuff, and they're like, well, no, honey, like, that's not going to happen. Like, that's so cute that you want to go to this place that costs more than your father makes in a year, but that's probably not happening. So I did apply. And then one day I got the acceptance letter, and I was so excited. And my mom said, honey, that we're so proud of you for being accepted, but you know that there's just no way that you can go. But we are really proud of you for being accepted. And then the next day, I got this gigantic envelope filled with my financial aid package. And it literally, my parents paid $500 a year for me to go to this fantastic school. And it was all these combinations of, people, and I have to say, I love donors. Like, somebody said, some smart girl in Ohio. Like, okay, that's me, I'm coming. Donors come up with stuff, and they had patched together this incredible package for me, and so I was able to go to this wonderful school, really fantastic school, and encounter these amazing teachers. And so when I got there, oh my God, so I had this terrible experience where I went to buy my books for my first semester. And the books, I go through the bookstore and have this stack of these really expensive books, and I'm like, ruh-roh, like, no one talked to me about this. So I get up to pay for my books, and this woman tells me what the total is, and I'm thinking, oh, geez. All right, I'm going to bounce my first check. Never done that before. So I pull out my checkbook, and she said, I don't think you need to pay like that. Everybody has an account, and you just swipe your ID. And I'm like, yeah, I don't think I have something like that. She said, well, how about if I give it a try? And I'm like, okay. And I hand her my student ID, and she swipes it. And she's like, oh, yeah, look. And I was like, oh, my gosh, no kidding. Somebody set up my book account. Like, thank you, Kenyon College. So it was awesome. I mean, I can't pretend that it wasn't just awesome.
Was that really a book account, or it just went to bill you later?
No, it was an account they set up to cover my books.
I think my college card just billed me later. So at Kenyon, you studied?
English Lit. I was an English major pretty much my entire career as an undergraduate. And then at the end so I was going to be an English drama double major. Very practical. And my idea was, well, I'm going to try to devote my life to the theater. And if it doesn't work out, I can always fall back on my English degree. So by the end of my junior year, literally the end of my junior year, I realized the drama thing is not what for me. This is not really what I want to do. So I went to my academic advisor and said, I don't want to double major in drama anymore. What do you think I should do? And liberal arts college, he pulls out the thing. It's like, well, based on everything. I, by the way, had taken all these psychology classes just because I liked it. At the end, oh my gosh, I had the most talented intro psych instructor. She was unbelievable. And at Kenyon, intro was a year-long course. And so you had a semester of psychology as a biological science and a semester of psychology as a social science. And she was talented. She was an adjunct or a visiting assistant professor. She was incredible. I studied because I'm a nerd, but I didn't have to study because her lectures were so exciting and compelling. Like I would repeat her lectures at the dinner table to people, right, at the Commons when we were having dinner. She was so great. So right at the end of my first year, I bumped into her and she said, so Laura, you really have a knack for psychology. Have you ever thought about majoring in psychology? And I said, do you know what I said? I just can't see myself majoring in psychology because I don't find it intellectually rigorous. Which I'm sure she was like, ow! And I'm like, now, oh my gosh, how embarrassing. And she was, obviously here I am, so.
So you did switch to a double major.
So he said you can double major in poli-sci, based on what you've taken, poli-sci, philosophy, classics, or psychology. And I said, oh, okay, maybe I'll do psychology. So I double majored in psychology. So I was a psychology major for 1 year.
Okay. And so at the end of college, what did you think you were going to do next?
So I wanted to be a professor, right? But I didn't know in what. So I applied to graduate school in both English Lit and psychology and lied on my applications, right? Obviously, because I said, I wanted to devote my life to Elizabethan drama or psychology or personality psychology. So I just lied. And this was back in the old days, and it was hard. That meant I had to type my personal statements over and over and like white out things because I was just too tired to do it. And so I literally applied in both English Lit and Psych. By the way, I never took the Psych GRE. I took the English GRE because I was that close to going to become an English professor.
So what swayed you in the other direction?
Okay, two things. One was I did the honors in English option, which meant writing a thesis and taking an exam on the history of American and English literature. So we had to read like everything. And when that ended, I kind of had taste aversion of the eyes for reading thick books. And then, this is terrible, but it turns out, I didn't know this, psychology programs decide a lot sooner than English Lit programs. So I started getting acceptances from psychology graduate programs, and I thought, oh, great, they'll make the decision for me. Psychology wants me, English doesn't, I'm going to psychology. So then I committed to going to Michigan State University for graduate school in social and personality psychology, and then I started getting acceptances in English. And I had to actually make a decision. So this school contacted me and said, we are so pleased to offer you this fellowship, this graduate fellowship in Elizabethan drama, which is what I wanted to do, right? I wanted to be this like Shakespeare scholar. And it's a full ride, 5 years, all this money. And I said, I'm sorry, I already accepted to have an acceptance to a school that I'm going to go to. And they said, can I ask where it is? And I said, Michigan State. And they said, Michigan State's English department isn't even close to as good as ours. And I was like, I know, I'm going in psychology. And they're like, what? So I felt bad, but that's life.
Sure. So I think we're all really happy with that choice, and the field has been better because of it. Do you ever think about the counterfactual if English Lit acceptances came first? What your life would be like now?
No, I do. When my first year really of graduate school was so miserable because I wasn't ready to do just one thing. I think when you're from a liberal arts background, it's this idea that like, well, all the classes are psychology. And so I had this I kept myself going by pretending that I would get my PhD in social psychology or personality psychology and then go back and get another one in English, like whatever, as if. But that kept me feeling like I was going to be okay. But currently, like where we live in Columbia, we're surrounded by Columbia, Missouri, we're surrounded by English and history and more liberal arts professors. We live close to a bunch of people, so I get to see them all the time, and I'm much happy with my life, I would say.
So you mentioned going to Michigan State. There you worked with Bob Emmons. Tell me about those first few years.
Yeah, so remember, this would have been late 80s, so I showed up in like ripped jeans and spiky hair, lots of black eyeliner, and Bob was like, at that time, I mean, if you know Bob, or you know him like in the last 20 years, that's not the Bob I knew. He, oh my gosh, he used to wear like these matching pants and shirt outfits. But what was cool about it was he was just like a brand new assistant professor. It was his first, I would say, I think students often make the mistake of only wanting to work with these famous people. Bob sent me a letter. Remember, this is, again, there was no email back in my day. He sent me a letter that said, hey, I'm a new assistant professor at Michigan State. I've looked over the applicants, and I would really be interested in working with you. The social and personality area does not have an apprenticeship model, but I do. And so I want you to be my apprentice, and we'll work together and, you know, blah, 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 blah. And he sent some reprints or whatever. So I read the papers and I was like, oh, so boring. I thought it over, and then finally I called him and said, well, you know, I've thought it through, and I guess, yes, I will work with you. And he was like, hello, that was like not even a question. Of course you will, you idiot. I'm like, okay. So working with him was incredible. He was so passionate and so like really interested too in like training me. And I would say at the time that was not the most supportive environment. And so I had this little island of support from Bob. And so he was constantly like, you know, giving me feedback on my writing, being very generous with projects. And the very first project I worked on, which was the thing that got me over that hump of feeling so miserable, was a daily diary study in the old days when they were actually written reports that people would do. And I was in charge of filing them and keeping track of things. And I loved it. I'm like, oh my God. Like, I didn't know that I was going to get to read people's diaries, right? This is the best. So I was very happy then.
And then so midway through your career, Bob gets an offer to move, and you decided to move with him. What went into that decision?
So, well, I have to tell you, I have a story you probably have never heard.
Great.
I went with this friend of mine from Michigan State, and we decided to go to a fortune teller. Oh my God. So we drove out into the country in the dark of night in this hills of rural Michigan, and we went to this woman who was a fortune teller. So I got there, and she had me trace my initials in the sand. So she gave me, and I did it, right? I'm like, this is cool. So then she said, you're going to move to a warmer climate. And I said, no, I'm not. Like, I love it here. I loved East Lansing. I love Michigan State. I still have a really warm spot in my heart for Michigan State. No, I'm not. She said, I see you going someplace warm, maybe California. I'm like, no, I'm going to be here for probably 5 years, and I would never go there. And she said, okay. She's like, I don't know. I see you going to California, and then you're going to live in a very warm climate like Texas or Arizona. And I said, I would never live in Texas. Like, no, that's nuts. Because to me, that was never going to happen. All my friends, many people, growing up in Ohio, everybody was moving to Texas all the time because that's where the jobs were. But I was like, no. So anyway, she said, well, this didn't go. I can tell I was wrong about everything. So do you want to just do you have any questions for me about anything? And I said, why did you have me write my initials in the sand? And she said, because I wanted to know what your initials were. I'm like, what? Why didn't you just ask me? She said, I could have, but people like that sand gimmick. So literally, we left. I'm like, wow, she got me way wrong. And then, of course, I ended up moving to California and then to Texas. I started my career in Texas. But so Bob said, I get to my office one day when I'm thinking, I love it here. I have the perfect apartment, really close. Everything's so great. I'm so happy. And Bob's like, come here, I got to talk to you. What? Like I thought I did something wrong, but it turned out we were moving to California.
How did that change your grad experience then?
It was a huge change. So at Michigan State at that time, it's not like this anymore, but it was very competitive and frightening. And they literally did that thing where they said, look to the person to your left, look to the person to your right. One of those people won't be here next year. So we lived in constant fear. And it was there every day. Like the very first moment you got on there, they said, what have you done to establish your national reputation as a social psychologist? I haven't done anything. I don't even know what that means. Ah! It was so scary. Then we get to UC Davis, which at that time was in this transition, right? We all recognize Davis now as this really research-oriented department, but when we got there, like Bob's hire was part of transforming the department to a more research focus. And like I would talk to grad students who would explain to me that publishing in JPSP was potentially misogynistic. I'm like whatever. Like this, no, you can't do it. It's like the empirical method is a capitalist tool and lots of stuff. And I was really my fish out of water there because I became a Dust Bowl empiricist while I was at Michigan State. And then at UC Davis, everyone was like, oh, we need to talk about like these deep questions. I'm like, what? Why are we talking and thinking? We just should be analyzing data and writing things up and publish. But I got to take really cool seminars from really cool people. And so like I got to take a consciousness seminar from Tom Natsoulis and social cognition seminar from Joel Johnson, and just really deep, right? I took a seminar on object relations, like, wow, things I had never had the time or inclination, frankly, to read that now are, parts of my sort of intellectual heritage that I think are really important.
So you mentioned that you eventually made your way to Texas.
Mm-hmm.
So your first job right out of graduate school was at Southern Methodist University in Dallas. I remember myself being on the job market and hearing this very annoying story. I promise she's relatable. This is not relatable. So do you want to tell the audience how you got that job?
So I was in my last year of graduate school, and I was applying, right? I was on the job market. I applied all over the place, lots of different places. And SMU, Southern Methodist University, had a job, but I did not apply for it. And so on the day that they were picking the interviewees, right, Jamie Pennebaker called me and said, hey, Laura, we're getting ready to, interview people. Where's your stuff? And I was like, well, I don't know. Like, I'm such an asshole. Oh, my God. I don't know. Maybe. I'm not sure. He's like, listen, you fax me your Vita. So I faxed him my Vita. And later that day, he called me for an interview. So they had no letters of rec or personal statement or anything. I mean, eventually, I'm sure they had to get those things. But literally, he just plucked me out, and I was like, oh wow, that worked out.
Sounds really nice.
I will say that they, SMU, it was, when I got there, it was an incredible opportunity, right? So Jamie Pennebaker was there, David Watson, Leanna Clark, and then David Mitchell and Cognitive Alan Brown. It was a really cool group of colleagues. Like, it was like being I was pretty young, right, compared to everybody else, but it was just incredible to have these people as my mentors and colleagues. It was really awesome.
Yeah, and you've always spoken so warmly about your time at SMU, but you eventually made the transition to the University of Missouri. Mm-hmm. What motivated that decision?
People like you, and Jason, and Chris, and where the hell is Jake? Anyway. And Josh. So what happened is I had so much fun at SMU, right? And we loved Dallas. We had so many great friends there, and it was just really fun. I mean, it was a good place to live, and work. But they did not have a really strong PhD program at that time, and so it became clear that if I wanted that part of my life, if I wanted to be able to usher in the next generation of scholars, I needed to go someplace with a stronger graduate program, or a graduate program that I would feel like, wow. because I always wanted to be in a place where my students were taking classes so that they would know more than I do. And so I found that at Missouri. I will say, all these people told me, oh, that's a silly decision you're making because there aren't any good grad students, right? You're going to get there and you're going to find out that it's very disappointing that all these grad students aren't that great. And I just have had more than enough proof that they were completely wrong. Yay.
I want to talk a bit about, you've mentioned a few mentors, Bob specifically. Are there other mentors you've had throughout your career, and maybe tell a few stories about how they've changed different directions?
When I was an undergraduate, right, there was this, my psychology advisor was this guy, John Williams, who was he taught the learning and memory course. He got me the English major. I was the only English major to be the proctor of the rat lab. Oh my God, I was not good at it. Many rats were harmed. Kenyon they don't get new rats. They just have these really old, big rats that live in the rat lab year after year. But anyway, when I was sending out my applications to graduate schools in English Lit, and I happened to be standing in the hallway of the psych department, and I was standing in front of the bulletin board where they had the grad school flyers. And he said, hey, Laura, I see you're standing there in front of the grad school flyers. You thinking about grad school? And I said, yeah, I've already got all the information I need from these programs in English Lit. And he said, English Lit? Maybe I'm not saying you wouldn't do really great things if you went into English. But aren't you really a scientist? Well, I don't know. Am I? And he said, you really should think about social and personality psychology. Like, you could really do something great there. And I was like, okay. And pulled a couple cards off and oh my God, thank you. He was pretty awesome. And then Bob, of course, who told me, you need to be here all the time. Like I was like, oh, okay, got it. That was super helpful. And then Jamie Pennebaker. When I got to SMU, I didn't have I didn't have students. I didn't really have a lab. I had a room with me in it. And so Jamie said, why don't you come to my lab meeting? And so I started going to his lab meetings every week, which started the tradition of the early morning, horrifyingly early lab meetings that my students currently love. So it was like being in a postdoc with Jamie while also being an assistant professor. So it was really amazing. Mike Best, who was an animal learning scholar, was the chair of the department when I was hired and the associate dean at one point. When I wrote my very first grant, he was the dean who signed off on it. And then he called me. I'm sitting in my office, right? And the dean calls and he's like, hey, Laura, time to go celebrate your grant. I said, Mike, I didn't get it. I just applied for it. He's like, I've got a really good feeling. Let's go. And so I went as a new assistant, maybe a third or fourth year assistant professor, and played pool and drank beer and ate cheese fries with the dean. And then I did get that grant, so that's pretty fun.
Any others?
Oh, yeah. And then probably Ed Diener. I don't even know. Somehow, you know what? Ed and I think we first, I had known him, of course. He was my advisor's advisor, right? He's my intellectual grandfather. I think that he and I, we knew each other. We chatted. I always adored Ed. But we really bonded at this one MPA. Oh, my God. I wish I had a picture. I don't have a picture of it. Ed came in a ponytail. Did you know he had one ever? No. He came in a ponytail, and I had a nose ring. And we were so cool. So we were pretty cool, hanging out at MPA. And then that was we were bonded for life.
Seems like a natural way to gain a mentor. I want to talk to you about your own mentorship as well, mostly because I've benefited a great deal from it. What do you strive most for in mentoring young scholars?
Yeah, what do I strive most for? I want students to be able to get the job they want, whatever that is. I want them to have a life where they wake up and they're excited about what they're doing. or as excited as they can be, given their temperament. I want everybody to just, maximize. Look, graduate school is so, people tell you that. I used to say to people when I was in grad school, if I ever say this is the best years of my life, someone just kill me. But it's a really precious time, right? Where you're dedicated to this slavish thing, right? You have no money and it's so crazy, but it is really like something, right? It is a very special time. And so I just want to make sure that my students get to use that time to do things that get them to where they want to be in the future.
And I informally polled your graduate students at our dinner the other night, and we've all agreed that you are a great mentor, so we're just going to state that as a fact. But beyond our opinions, you spend a lot of time developing. You said you sort of choose rough around the edges students.
Maybe. I mean, they don't seem rough, right? I don't know. What is it? I don't know.
Do you have a philosophy of mentorship that you think makes you a good mentor, or that others can emulate to make them better mentors?
Yeah, I think, and I don't know, like, what is it? What makes the difference? But I do know I've had conversations with people who will say, wow, you sure get lucky because my students are awesome. But I think they're not realizing the amount of the time and the effort and the faith that you have to have in these people, right? To me, it's a huge commitment, bringing a student in and collaborating with them and sort of helping them become their own person, right? And be that next generation that I dreamed about creating is a lot of work. And it takes a lot of care because their livelihood depends in so many ways on their relationship with you. So I take that very seriously.
Yeah, another aspect of your mentorship style that I think really sticks out is you really treated us like family. Laura's graduate students are often at her house. She would have us over for weekly family dinners. She hosts elaborate dinner parties that are very fun, and I think my colleagues and I found that to be so wonderful and a great part of our training. But I wanted to get your take. There's also been some growing attention in the field about those lines blurring between sort of a professional relationship with students in which there's this hierarchical nature, and then personal relationships where you're friends and sort of have this out of the lab relationship as well. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on sort of how you navigate those lines with your students.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm not sure. I guess I feel like it is, to me, I enjoy being a mentor, right? I really enjoy that role. I care about my students as people, and I'm certainly spend time talking about all those issues and but on the other hand, at the same time, I have this other role, right? But the other thing is, I feel by inviting my graduate students, like if people are in one of my seminars, they come to our house for this gigantic, elaborate dinner party. To me, that's a service to the culture. Like that, I'm trying to show people, these students, like, this is how it should be. Like, I believe I pay for the beer, no matter what, right? Grad students don't pay for stuff. Like, that's insane. I have a job. I mean, I have like a, quote, real job. So that's like, Bob did that, right? Bob would never let me pay for anything. Of course, graduate students don't pay for things. But I also think that modeling like a really nice dinner party is a lost art, and it is part of my duty to the world, right, to Western civilization, to have graduate students over so that then when they have their fancy parties, they know, what should the signature cocktail be for tonight for the first course, or what should we do? Let's have flambe or baked Alaska for dessert.
These are real things.
We do that.
To us.
We do.
Yeah, so I want to get into a few sort of topical discussions about your trajectory through your career. One thing you've been involved in, sort of towards a research topic, is the advent of positive psychology. Do you want to talk maybe a little about being involved with the starting of that subfield?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would say this. I don't really identify as a positive psychologist. I don't begrudge the existence of positive psychology, but my version of that area, my version of the science of human strengths or the psychology of the good life is not the one that I feel is often promulgated by positive psychology. So I feel like some of what positive psychology is about is overselling conclusions in order, like the certainty of conclusions, because here's 5 ways to be happy, or here's 2 ways to have meaning in life, right? All these like things that you're supposed to do, which I think are good ways to sell books and, you know, motivational tapes and retreats and workshops and whatnot. But to me, are not really accurate reflections of science and the tentative and humble nature of scientific conclusions. And also, I really bothers me, especially as someone who studies meaning in life and who, as Heintzelman has shown me quite persuasively, meaning in life is a commonplace experience. So the only way you can sell that to someone is by first convincing them they don't have it. And I think that's just wrong. I think that people need to recognize they already have a lot of these things that positive psychology sort of promulgates. So I don't really, who am I? I don't know. Whenever a student sends me an email and says, I really want to work with you, I love positive psychology, my reply is, okay, what is that? Like, what do you mean by that? And then they never reply back. But if someone could actually reply and say, oh, here's what I think it is, I think we could have that conversation.
You speak about your identity a bit. Although your work is clearly at the intersection of social and personality psychology, you very strongly identify as a personality psychologist. What has built that identity and made it so strong?
I am highly susceptible to the fundamental attribution error. I don't know. I think it's possible that it's because of my early training in English literature and like that understanding of character and people and sort of ways of understanding human behavior that are very character-oriented. Somehow, that is who I am. And I think that it is unrealistic to think that the things that people carry around inside of them, right, those the dynamic organization of those psychophysical systems that determine their unique adjustment to the environment, are somehow things that you can just manipulate in the lab. So I just believe there is such a thing as personality, and there are these enduring aspects of people, and studying the person. I mean, I'm just interested in people, right? I like people. And so to me, it's very natural that I turned out to be a personality psychologist.
And you sort of entered the field right when personality psychology had essentially defended its existence against attack, we'll say. Have you, even sort of entering after that phase, have you seen changes in how those two subfields relate to one another?
Yeah. So I think it's very interesting. I was at this ARP conference, and Jeff Simpson showed a video of this super, like, insecurely attached woman in a relationship with a securely attached guy, and it was this video of the two of them having some kind of conflict discussion, right? And then I couldn't help but tell everyone, you know, in some ways, personality psychology, we're acting like the crazy girlfriend sometimes. I think that personality psychologists absolutely have a right to feel that, wow, we were under fire, we almost didn't exist anymore, people's careers were ruined, right? Tenure track lines were gone, right? We have a right to that history. But social psychologists will bend over backwards to try to be egalitarian, and personality psychologists really need to, like, step up to the plate. I think that it's interesting because I think personality psychology, the habits of personality psychology involve really large samples, excellence in measurement, quantitative sophistication, long time periods, right, of longitudinal investigations. The things that are hallmarks of personality psychology happen to also be, in my opinion, hallmarks of replicable science. And so I think I think we're doing great. But I do think that the two fields are coming maybe to a little more of a reconciliation. And I think many more people have the slash, right? Personality slash social or social slash personality.
At the beginning, I highlighted some of your editorial positions, and I think that's sort of a bit outside of the lab, so we can include that here.
If we must.
Why did you start editing?
Well, I got this phone call from Jerry Sauls, and he said, hey, I'm the editor of PSPB. Would you like to be an associate editor? And I said, I don't know, maybe, let me think about it, blah, blah, blah. So I was trying to figure out, like, would this be a fun thing to do? It seemed like it might be a fun thing to do. And at the time, I didn't know any women who were associate editors or editors except for Avril Thorne, who was an associate editor at Journal Personality. And so I sent her an email and asked about, like, why, what do you think? And she said, well, you know, what's really great, and she was right, about being an editor is you don't have to travel anymore. You're in the conversation all the time. And I was like, oh, I like that idea. And it was really an issue of, it was a long time before I would have a child, but this idea of a way that you are practicing in the publication process all the time, and you're a part of that scientific conversation even if you're not, right? And so she said for her anyway, it was so great because she could be home with her kids but still being part of that conversation.
I imagine that role is a great deal of stress and sort of banging your head on the table, but also quite satisfying at times. What sort of is the most fulfilling aspect of editing?
Like to be super honest,
yeah.
The most fulfilling thing is when I accept a paper that the reviewers hated. It just is. I'm sorry, reviewers. I have done it where I'm like, you know, I get what they're saying, but I still think there's something here that's great. And I've done it. It's so much fun. It is the most gratifying thing. And you know, I've never had that experience in my life. You hit these editors who are like, we must have a consensus among the reviewers. I don't believe that at all. I feel like, hey, if I get like one reviewer hates it, one reviewer loves it, that's probably an interesting paper. So at least give it a shot. So yeah, I once had a reviewer, I accepted a paper that this reviewer absolutely hated. And then a few months later, I sent them another paper to review. And at the beginning of their review, they said, I can't pretend to understand what counts as science at this journal anymore, but, and then wrote the review. And I'm like, oh, well.
So besides those sort of schadenfreude moments, if there are people interested in editing, what misconceptions can you dispel for them?
I think people give it a try. It's so worth trying. I think if you want to be a part of that conversation, right? One of these big, when I was trying to find associate editors for the third section of JPSP, and I contacted Howard Tennant, who was the longtime editor of Journal Personality. I said, can you help me out here? And he's like, oh. I'm like, I want to have women involved in this process, right? All the men I asked said yes immediately. All the women I asked said no. And so I emailed Howard. I'm like, what am I going to do? I'm trying to get women to be represented in this important role. And he said, oh, please, Laura. Trying to get a woman to be an associate editor of Journal Personality, the only thing I can compare it to is trying to get a date for the prom. No. I think that a lot is made of the fact that so many women say no. I think if women talk to other women who've said yes, they would understand that it's actually kind of fulfilling. It's very interesting. It's not that different from teaching, only a really large, really distance learning oriented seminar with really smart people. I mean, it's a lot like that. To me, it's very fun. It's like having a conversation.
And on the other side of the coin, you have an audience full of authors and reviewers here. Do you have anything you want to share with them?
Okay, so I would say this. I think people, when you look at a journal, you might get the wrong impression, right? So it seems like it's always the same people. And you think, oh, those people, man, everything they submit gets published. That is not true. They submit a lot. Their rejection rate is probably the same as yours, but they're sending in papers all the time. You get a revise and resubmit. Does it seem super hard? And you think, oh, what's the point? No! If you were watching a baseball game and the batter has 2 strikes and then went, you know what, screw, I can't do it. No! Give it another try. You've got some more times. But people do. They give up. Papers die on the vine because someone, like every editor will tell you, at the end of their editorship, there's a whole bunch of papers that they never revised and resubmitted. And at the end of my editorship of JPSB, we contacted all these authors and said, it's been like 2 years, but we're still going to give you a chance. And there might have been 2 or 3 of them were like, oh my gosh, okay, wow, we have a chance to get in JPSB. It's worth it to try. It's worth it to try. And you know what? Even if you think this is a half-assed way to deal with this problem, so what? Try it. Give it a shot. If it gets in, yay. If it doesn't, you have a better paper anyway to go to the next place. So I think that people need to understand good ideas will eventually get published. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of where and when. You just got to keep on trying. And then in the world of reviewers, I say, be nice. What the heck is wrong with people? I would say this. I am an advocate for the high road. It's so much better. The view from the high road is better, and the company is much more pleasant as well. Take the high road. Give people a chance. You know, people can have mistakes in their paper. They can have things that you think are show signs that they don't know what they're doing. Give them a break. We're all trying to make good science, and I think being respectful is just super important.
So now I want to take a step actually off of campus, not only just out of the lab, and talk about your actual personal life.
Okay.
So you have a lovely wife, Lisa.
Mm-hmm.
I think knowing Lisa, it's safe to say you guys share a lot of the same values, but not like background or personality at all. Tell me about Lisa.
So Lisa, yeah. So Lisa, we met at Kenyon College. She is an introvert. She would be like not pleased to be up here, for example. She is a talented writer. We were college students together. She grew up, she was a foreign service kid. So she was born in Ethiopia and has lived all over the world, right? I was born in Dover, Ohio, and spent my entire life there. So the odds of us meeting even were so crazy, but we met in college and here we are.
And Lisa's outside of academia.
Correct. I think this is I mean, listen, if you're with someone who is also a psychologist, you know, that's wonderful. And if it works out, that's so great. But there is a certain joy in when you describe what you're doing to your partner and they know that you're right. Listen to what this reviewer said, and she knows that reviewer is wrong because I'm always right. And I like that. She has never taken a single psych class. And then like, no, maybe she will. No, she won't.
Probably not.
No, I won't allow it.
So another aspect of your relationship is that it is with another woman. You two met in college. I'm curious, have you been sort of out professionally your whole career, or was that more of a gradual process?
It was more gradual. I would say it was weird, right? So I was always out to my, well, not always. How is that true? I probably, when I moved from Michigan State to UC Davis, right? So then I was out to all the grad students, but not to the faculty. And I was like the least popular lesbian in Davis, California, which is really bad. That's like, I was dog meat to these people. I was so out of place. I got so much criticism for like shaving my legs and wearing makeup and I brought a steak to a lesbian barbecue. And they were like, and I'm like, oh, I'm from Dover, Ohio. I don't know what people do here. So they had to everyone else had to finish their grilling before they would put my steak on the grill because no one wanted their tofu to come in contact. Oh, God, it was so awful. I was so bad. But I had dear, dear friends, my friend Angela Simon, who was just like my lifeline, and I survived that. And then once I got to SMU, then it was just much easier to come out. Lisa moved to Dallas because my mother was ill, and I basically realized at that time, this is it. Like, I want you here. And so she moved to Dallas, and that's how we got things started.
Do you think that being an out lesbian has affected your career in any ways?
You know, it's an interesting question. I have had that, people ask me that question, right? I don't know. I think that you'd be surprised, right? So I have had, job interviews different places throughout my career, and I always talk about my wife, Lisa, right? I mean, I'm an over-discloser. Obviously, I would not have agreed to this horrifying thing that I'm doing right now. And really, like, you'd be surprised the places where someone's like, I wonder what it would be like to be an out lesbian on this prestigious Midwestern campus. And I was like, weird. Like, I don't get that. It's never been an issue at Mizzou. And I did have a conversation once, years ago, with a gay social psychologist, and we were talking, and I said, people often ask me if being an out gay person has affected my career in a harm to my career. And I said, I just don't think that it has. And he said, I guess you'll never really know. And then I got the Jack Block Award, and no, I kind of know now. I didn't. You're wrong.
So you and Lisa got married in 2014. Tell me about that sort of shift to that and what that meant to you.
Yeah, well, part of that is Sam. So we have our son, Sam, who was born in 2003. And I didn't know that it would even matter to him if we ever were married or not. I mean, right? And it wasn't some big thing in my head most of my life. And then the day that, the day President Obama came out in favor of marriage equality, that was a big day, a very big day. And then the day when the Supreme Court struck down DOMA so that we could get married, I called home and I said to Sam, hey, he was like, I don't know even how old he was, 10 or 9. I said, hey, listen, you know how Mom, Lisa, and I have not been able to get married? Well, they just changed the law, so now we can. And he started crying. And I said, what's going on, honey? And he said, I'm just so happy. And I was like, oh my God. So that day it happened that Lisa's parents were coming to visit us. And so I said, okay, Sam, so tonight, when Papa and Gigi are here, I'm going to give you a signal, and then I'm going to ask Mom Lisa to marry me. And I said, now, it's really important to me that you have my back. So sweet. So he said, okay. And I said, so I'll give you the signal, and you will, you come and stand by me, and I'll ask her to marry me. So Lisa's parents arrived, and then I realized I don't have a ring. And Jamie Arndt was like, just go and get a gumball machine. I'm like, I think you're wrong about that. Get something, whatever. So then I remembered I had my mother's wedding ring. And so I got that. And so Lisa's parents were there, and everyone's sitting around our kitchen table. And I said, okay, Sam. And I went and got my mom's wedding ring. And I kneeled down in front of Lisa. And I felt Sam's hand on my shoulder. So sweet. So I asked her to marry me, and yay, she said yes. After being together for almost 30 years, that's awesome. And everybody, it was just awesome. It was way bigger of a deal than I ever imagined. And then we went to Chicago and got married, and it was fun. It was like something out of a TV show. We were there. It was a Friday morning, and we were at the Justice of the Peace, and there were all these couples getting married. There were every possible couple you can imagine, right? There's a pregnant teenager and her boyfriend. There's two guys, two older gay men in Hawaiian shirts, two younger gay men who smelled incredible, right? There's us. There's the lesbians in matching Ashes washed jeans and mullets, and there's us. We were wearing cocktail dresses, but it was the most wonderful thing. And every couple who came out, and it didn't matter, it was an elderly straight couple, a couple of crazy lesbians, this and that, and whatever. Whoever came out that door got applauded by everybody there, and it was just fantastic. One of the most wonderful days of my life.
So you've been talking about Sam a little bit. We'll actually focus on him for a minute. How old is he now?
He's 15.
I think he's growing older faster than any other kid in the world. What's he into these days?
Dungeons and Dragons. He plays the trombone. Oh, he's really into politics. You can follow him on Twitter. I'm not kidding. And he's very into politics. He's very into history. And so he has a lot of opinions about all kinds of things.
And I heard he's taking AP Psych this
year.
He
is. Oh my God. And they're using Dave Meyer's book. But I'm like into it. I thought that was cool. So I sent Dave an email and said, oh my gosh, my son is taking AP Psych and they're using your book. Like, how cool is that? So he emailed me back and he's like, oh, that's amazing, blah, blah, blah. And then I said, oh, he's so impressed that, I know the guy who wrote his book. And I'm like, P.S., thank you for always being such an amazing force for good in the universe. And he's like, well, you better tell him that I think you're amazing too. And I'm like, so I go into Sam and pull out my phone. Here's this email chain you want to check out.
Was he impressed?
Not really. He's 15.
How do you think being a parent has changed sort of your trajectory of your work, your day-to-day work?
Yeah, people worry about this. I think maybe men do, but I know that women worry about this. When I was pregnant with Sam, I was really nervous about what's going to happen, right? And it was funny because I got this, Paul Wink, who was maybe an associate editor at Journal Personality or something, he and I ended up having this email exchange. And I said to him, oh, I'm pregnant, I'm really nervous and how this is going to affect my life. And he said, which is great, and everyone should say this to all pregnant women, oh, I'm sure it's going to be just like my wife. After she had the baby, yes, there's so many things you have to worry about and all that stuff, but she became so much more creative. And her work was so much more interesting and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, okay, that's the kind of new mom I'm going to be. And it's kind of true. I mean, I would say there was some time at the very beginning where I felt like I got hit by a train on purpose. Like, why did I do this? I miss my brain. I miss being able to focus on just one thing. But the truth is it reset a lot of my priorities so that the work I did had to be something fun. If it's keeping me away from this adorable human being, it better be fun, worthwhile. It better be exciting to me. And it is, right? So things that we would do, I'm looking at Jason, I'm looking at you. When we were what if we did this?
And then we did it.
Then we do it, right? And I don't know that I had that same level of daring and let's try it, let's see what happens, until I lived through motherhood. Because it's I can do anything now. I made a human.
So speaking of Sam, my first summer as a grad student, we would come to your house, I think weekly, and have spaghetti dinners. And Sam, who was maybe 6 at the time, enforced very strict no shop talk
Chip
rules.
Off the old block.
And would enforce them. And so he had a deck of questions that if we talked about work, he would raise a real life question about
and it would be what's your favorite bubblegum flavor? Or so when you were 5, what were you like? Or just random real life questions to get people to stop talking shop.
Yes, so in the spirit of Sam, we're going to do a few of those now.
All right.
So these will be rapid fire.
Okay, got it.
So if you weren't a psychology professor, what would you be? A
caterer or a florist.
She's very skillful in both of these domains. You throw wonderful dinner parties, 5 people at the table.
I hate to say this because I feel it's a downer, but it would be my parents. And mainly Sam, because my mom never got to meet Sam, of course. My dad did, but they are both gone, and it would be awesome if they could see the life that we have. I know, and I used to say, I shouldn't talk about this because it's going to get me all verklempt, but so my mother died when I just had started my job at SMU, and every good thing that happened to me, I always felt took me farther away from the me that she knew, and it made me feel when we moved to Missouri, I was like, oh, how is she ever going to find us kind of feeling, right? Even that didn't make any sense, but that's how I felt. then having Sam, right? All these good things that have happened to me since she died. But just really because we were talking about this insane thing that we're doing right now, I started thinking about it. And the truth is, that isn't true. That's me underestimating my mother's capacity to imagine my future, which she always proved was boundless. So, never mind. Oh my God. I'm sorry.
This pivot's going to seem very insensitive.
Let's go.
Favorite TV show?
My current favorite TV show. I like The Good Place. I don't watch that. We watch a lot of like just MSNBC 24/7. The Good Place. Killing Eve. I love that. We watch, right now we're watching it's very lowbrow. Continue, please.
Favorite book?
All time, Moby Dick. Right now, the Claire DeWitt novels. I don't know if anybody, no, you should read these. They're really fun. Sarah Gann's the author, and they're awesome. They're like a book in a book kind of thing going on, which I love.
Favorite musicians?
Rufus Wainwright, Louis Armstrong, Billie Holiday. Anybody else I like? I don't like to go to concerts. That's one of those things about me. Oh, it's too loud.
Favorite podcast?
It is not a psychology podcast. I'm sorry. I don't like to listen to shop talk. My favorite podcast, Archive. Does anybody listen to the Archive 81? So creepy. It's creepy, scary, twisted. I love that. And I like some that are about like murderers and Archive 81. You should listen to it. It's so awesome. Girl in Space. The main character is Samantha. I swear to God. Do you know this?
No.
Yeah, she has your accent, and she's adorable. She has all her little ways. You should listen to it.
Now I'm a little
Girl in
afraid
Space, Archive 81. There's got to be another like fiction. I like fiction, drama, right? I like audio drama.
Your most effective way to deal with stress?
Cooking. I do.
I'm going to creep a little back towards shop talk.
Okay.
Influential dead scholar.
Reviewer D. I think it would be, I thought about this. I think it would have to be Seymour Epstein. We use cognitive experiential self theory in our work somewhat, and also because he was this hero, right, who saved personality psychology from the jaws of Walter Mischel. And I went to this conference once. Can I tell my little story about Seymour Epstein? So I went to this conference in Poland, and if you saw Seymour Epstein at this conference, right, he would not have probably a huge following of groupies. But in Poland, he did. And the graduate students there just followed him everywhere. And they were just like, oh my gosh, I can't believe we're talking to Seymour Epstein. And so he and I chatted together. I held hands with him through a cemetery behind the psychology department in Warsaw. So everything was all about World War II. And Seymour Epstein told us about how he fought in World War II. And it was just talking to him was incredibly inspiring and so amazing. And so at the end of this week of this conference, we were leaving, and the graduate students from Poland, who all spoke six languages, and all the American academics were such losers. I'm like, oh, geez. But they were welling up with tears and taking his hand and saying, goodbye, Seymour. I was like, oh my God, this is so awesome. So in my family, to this day, Lisa and Sam and I will sometimes, if we have a sad departure, we will say, goodbye, Seymour.
That's amazing. Worst review?
Reviewer D. I was pre-tenure. I couldn't publish anything. The first few years I had my faculty position, I was really struggling. And SMU was a great place because they had this pre-tenure sabbatical. I wrote like 5 million papers and they all got rejected, not even revise and resubmit, all rejected. And this reviewer said, this work might be of interest to some small group of psychologists somewhere, but I can't imagine who they might be. And that was it. And it was typed at the top of a piece of paper, right? Because this was in the old days when they sent you these things as paper. And the editor said, I agree with reviewer D. And so that really hurt my feelings. I was like, ow, wow. But actually, you know what? It hit me like, oh, I'm not going anywhere, right? They'll have to fire me. I'm not quitting. And so it just didn't mean anything.
Final one, what are some other moments that made you keep going?
So I think, I think it's difficult. Like, for me, like the hardest times in my life when my mother died, when my father died, of course, lots of failure, lots of rejections, all kinds of mean things, mean reviews and stuff. But I think the having students, right, and you recognize that, hey, listen, these folks need to continue to have hope and confidence and faith in what we're doing, and so that helps. I think also Sam, my son, and having conversations with him, we have a hot tub. That's kind of an embarrassing thing to say. It's not a time machine, it's just a hot tub. We get in there and we have conversations often. And one day he said to me, Mom, you're kind of living the American dream. and I'm like, what? And he's like, yeah, think about because he knows that when I grew up, we didn't have that much. And look at you now. And that's kind of a shot in the arm, right? It makes it easier to get up in the morning and remember that I think if you can have your kid look at your life and say, wow, you're doing a good job, feels pretty good.
Yes. So thank you very much for opening up your personal life, and that's all the time we have.
Yay!